Oh well. So it's been a while. Oh, I can't get used to these headphones. I'm gonna pop them over here. Right, so I don't have that sort of. There's that delayed audio thing going on. So I haven't got my mic set up or anything like that because I have mothballed my Twitch stream for a while now because I've started working on Dark Materials season 3, and every day is a full-on like 18-hour day. So I have been recording some videos, which I will release at a much later date about the whole process. Once the show's been released and all that kind of stuff, just talking about the things that are involved in a visual effects pipeline when you're working on a high-end television show. But I thought I'd pop in here, see if I can dust the cobwebs off of the Twitch stream and just run through a few different things. Now, some of you guys who have sort of been following my stream from the very beginning know that I have been slowly hunting and pecking my way through Houdini. I'm pretty competent, actually. It's sort of an intermediate level Houdini user, but I'm trying to get super comfortable. I'd like to get to the same level inside of Houdini as I am with Maya, and that's just knowing the guts of it inside and out, so that I can call up whatever node I need to solve whatever problem I need at the time. And it's a long way to go because there are a lot of nodes inside of Houdini, right? And also, it's about this idea of thinking procedurally. Now, you see lots of videos out there, going when you're in Houdini, you got to think procedurally and all this kind of stuff. But there's no real clear-cut sort of metaphor as to what that is or what what sort of what that involves. And it's just this idea of understanding how to encapsulate data and reuse data. Is pretty much what that term procedural means, right? But basically, in a nutshell, for a Maya artist, it's just how do you use instance modeling effectively? That's probably, if I say that and you guys out there are just like, oh yeah, okay, I get it, then you understand how to think procedurally. It's just about having data on your, like if you're building this massive city, this gargantuan sci-fi city, just understanding how what elements of that particular city you only need to calculate once, and then you can reuse over and over again. Not to be overly pedantic, but if this futuristic city has streetlights, well, you're not going to put streetlights everywhere. You're going to instance streetlights everywhere. But even the red, green, and blue sort of shader light values, you'll probably derive that from a singular entity and have that spam out all over the place. You can even use that red, green, and did I say blue? Red, green, and yellow light. You can use that for other instances within the cities, so nightclub neon signs and that kind of a thing, and sort of that's kind of the idea. Vaguely, there's a few other things. So, for example, always allowing parameters and data alterations not to completely destroy everything else down the chain in terms of what you're creating. So, for example, if I use a singular spline to create my lampposts and things like that, can I reuse that spline data elsewhere around the city? Can I maintain a connection to the spline data? Actually, that's the other thing. Thinking procedurally is how do I build up all kinds of construction history that's not memory intensive, that I can maintain so I can go back anywhere along the chain and make changes and not have it completely blow up my city set. So it's a little bit like that. If you're an old school Maya guy, you know that the big thing whilst you're working inside of Maya is to always delete history and always to freeze your transforms. Well, Houdini says that you don't have to do that. It's just about making sure that those calculations occur as minimally as possible. So that's it there. So what I wanted to do is jump into, I'm just mucking about with some tire modeling. Just building up a vehicle piece by piece, because all of the various different parts of a hard body vehicle model will run me through some of the same basics as, well, basically I started off in Maya that way, doing a lot of hard body modeling, and that got me nice and comfortable with the basic tools and techniques inside of Maya that I could start to branch out. So I'm taking that same sort of philosophy inside of Houdini and Blender as well. So when you're introducing yourself to a new 3D package, it just seems to be that the safest place to start is modeling. Modeling is fairly straightforward and to a certain degree, easy to sort of sort of diagnose and problem solve if you run into things later on down the line. So one of the things I wanted to touch upon is just, and I'll be doing this live. It's not like I've prepped a tutorial here. I'm just trying to figure out how I can take a fairly large project, move it from place to place, and be able to relink all of my assets without taking forever to do it. Okay, so I'll show you a little bit about what I got going on in my scene. So basically, I've got a LiDAR scan of a vehicle, and I'm currently, because the point cloud data is not dense enough, and the color point cloud, the color data per point is not of a high resolution enough that it could compete with like a 61 megapixel texture. I'm rebuilding this vehicle from scratch using the scan data, right? Now there are a variety of different ways I could do this. I could take the point cloud data, I could pre-mesh it, I could bring it into ZBrush, I could carve in some details for it, or I can convert this to a fluid and do this, high-level VDB calculation that's really super detailed, various different ways of doing it. But there's a specific thing that I'm trying to achieve with this. I'm trying to learn some of the very basic building blocks, whether it's lathing, extrusions, inserting edge loops, that kind of thing. The basic building blocks of polygonal modeling is what I want to do in this particular instance. So the one problem I'm having, though, is moving from place to place, especially during these COVID times, right? Oftentimes I'll have to transport assets or relocate them to various different hard drives. Now, ideally, in the situation of when I was back in the university I was teaching, I had a NAS drive set up in the office, and I had WAN access to the IP of that NAS drive, which is a bit of a security no-no, but it made it nice and handy, so I could map that to any drive letter I so choose. And I made sure that all my drive letter mappings were identical on my laptop, and my home PC, and my work PC, anywhere I was remotely doing any kind of stuff, all the drive letter mappings were identical. I can't do this now because the production I'm working on, security is quite tight, right? So data has to be encapsulated and transported in a variety of different ways, right? So it led me to this. As I was dealing with this vehicle kind of personal project, I thought, I'm going to see if I can figure certain things out that will help me in my work, right? So for those of you guys who are kind of not familiar with high-end television work, it's very different from the games industry. High-end television work, they generally, in terms of transferring assets back and forth, they use something called a high-speed Aspera server. And I believe IBM is the company that their Aspera servers are used widely throughout the visual effects industry. And it's primarily because of the uber high-speed data transmission, right? And they do some interesting and clever things to bump their speed up in ways that you wouldn't get off a normal data transfer server. But I'll talk about that later. But the unfortunate thing about that is, imagine working on a large-scale production with huge project directories, and all you have available to you is WeTransfer. It can get quite messy, and I don't like to work that way. My preference is that I'd like to sit down in front of my computer and work in the hard drive space in the drive letter mapping that I'd be doing at work, and that seamless transition from one PC to another, to my laptop, to my Mobile Studio Pro, it's all facilitated by that singular directory structure, right? So, having said that, I have an asset that I developed with a different drive letter mapping than I've got here, right? So here I've got two nodes at the object level inside of Houdini. There's my scan data, and here's my geometry build. Obviously, I'm starting with a tire, right? So when we deep dive into my tire node, you can see that all I'm doing is I'm building a profile curve and editing it, and then I'm building these individual tread pieces, and then I'm copying those tread pieces to a circle that I've created here, and I'm just merging the whole thing together after I do a revolve and a mirror for the tire piece, and so on and so forth. I'm not entirely sure this is the best method for building the tire. It's a legacy thing. This is how I built my very first tire inside of XSI, right? But I'm seeing other techniques which I might explore. It seems a little bit more interesting. So anyway, that's the construction side of things. This top node, that's my reference node with all the LiDAR scan data, right? So, well, now, the problem with this is that LiDAR scan data is heavy, and it's also made up of a dozen separate scans, right? So I scanned the hell out of this vehicle when I was in there, right? So you can see here are some earlier experiments that I was doing, particle fluid surface, just meshing the particles I had, converting VDB points, etc., etc. Just finding different ways of meshing that point cloud data. But this is when I made the decision, okay, I'm going to dive in there and do some traditional polygon modeling, right? Okay, so we got a bunch of exclamation marks. And for those of you guys who don't know Houdini, those are a bad thing, right? So it just means that there are problems with the data being calculated in those nodes. You can figure it out by hovering your mouse. I'm not touching it. Just hover over the node, and then you can hover over that exclamation mark, and then click it, wait a little while, and then you'll get a little bit of information as to what is going on, right? So in here, ooh, that's not entirely helpful. Where is the... Oh, yeah, of course, because I'm at a top level subnetwork, right? So I'll talk a little bit about that. So what I need to do is I need to dive into this subnet. What I did was I took all that LiDAR data and encapsulated it, so kind of like a huge group node, right? So when I dive in here, this is what we can see. So these are all the individual LiDAR scans, right? So I've imported that LiDAR scan data, I've transformed it, and I've deleted that section, selected the section that I needed, and deleted all extraneous bits, and I'm just merging it all together. And you can see that I've got a number of LiDAR setups that I'm going through. Now here, when we do what I said before about floating over and hitting the exclamation mark, we'll get what I was initially looking for. Just a little error message, right? So error occurred while reading the file, v:whatever, because it cannot find that file. So what we need to do is we need to tell Houdini where that drive letter is, right? So when I was doing compositing in Nuke, there was a way of setting up a Nuke node, and I have to look through my old notes to find this because it's been years, guys, years and years and years. But I set up a node that had the text information for drive letter mapping. That simply, I think it was just a string concatenation. I can't remember if I did it in Python. Just plugged it in, and it would add the new drive letter mapping. So for me, I need to turn that letter V to a letter E for it to find that point cloud data. Now, notice something. There's a really, really good habit, guys, is that even though I'm on my home PC and I'm on a different drive, I've kept all the folder structures named the same, right? So this folder structure that I've got named on my work PC is identical to the folder structure I've named here, except for the drive letter mapping, right? So all I have to do is change one letter. Even if it means, if you got a USB key or a USB drive, even if it means creating a whole bunch of blank folders, here's my content, here's my props, here's my vehicles, and you're creating all these blank folders, it's so worth it, right? It's so worth it. Keep that drive letter or that directory structure identical on every single drive that you use, and you'll thank me for it later. All you have to do is change that drive letter name. So how do we do that? Well, it took a little bit of digging. But I think there is a command that I came across called opchange. And what that does is it changes just the path name from one to another, right? So let's see if this will work. I'm going to click on this particular node so I can see that drive letter mapping. And I'm going to pop over here into my new pane tab types, and I'm going to find the text port, which I was looking for. I was like, is it a viewer? No, it's not in there. Inspector? No, it's in. So I checked miscellaneous, and there it is. We got our Python panel, an Orbital asset browser that's been around for ages, and then we got our text port in Houdini Engine Session Set. But the text port is what we're after, because the text port will allow us to type a few commands in. So let's see what help opchange gives us. There we go, right? So hit that, right? And is there a definition? So search and replace text and parameter values. That's exactly what we're after, right? Because this is our parameter value. We want to search and replace that parameter value. Just wondering if I need a flag for this. I don't think I do. right? So these are the flags. They're things that you type after you type in the command to say, except do this, or except do that, or if you have specific things that you want to do, right? But the default, I think, will just change the path. So let's try it, right? So if I say op change, and what I want to do is I want to op change my v colon. Yeah, I think that would be all right. V colon, and we want to change that to E colon, right? And so just a regular space will separate your different arguments. Hopefully this works. Let's try that, right? So we've gone through, and it's changed V to E on, all right, on my LiDAR import nodes. These were the ones that I had left. Let's check it out here in the window. So if I pop over here, did it do it? E, that's an E. Yes, that's an E. Ah, okay, cool. All those guys are changed. Why am I getting errors in here? Let's check that out, right? So invalid source, point cloud, LiDAR import 1. An error occurred. Let's see. Let's just recalculate that now and see. So that's an E. Now this should not be looking for the drive letter mapping, which I think is quite unusual. Unless, do I have to evaluate this? I shouldn't have to. So it is saying that it is looking for LiDAR import 11 in the V, which it shouldn't be. And it's interesting to me how it has errored out in a couple of areas, but here it seems to be fine. Let's see. It seems to be fine. So it seems to be picking up that drive letter mapping. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to see if I can just force the issue, right? Because it's looking for a V. So even though this is an E here, let's try this again. Let's go E colon. You are definitely an E. Ah, okay. So a middle mouse button dragging, it's not moving. So when I highlighted and turned on this LiDAR import node, it's going off and it's reloading this. So one of the things that I thought it happened too quick. So one of the things that it does is once it changes that drive letter mapping, okay, it's got to go and it's got to load up all those point clouds and redo all that information. And it is still giving me that error, which is interesting. So these are the ones that I changed my hand. You know, calculate that node. It should be fine. There's no real reference to directory pathing here. Let's pop down and see if we get something and try and merge this all together. Right. So you can see down here, it's cooking all that LiDAR point cloud data. And we should be able to get what we're after in just a second here. Man, I really wish I remembered my coffee. Oh well. Okay, so you can see that our errors have gone, but we are left with another. The following attributes were not found in this file, color and scan 1. Okay, that's a bit concerning because it should find the color point cloud data. It's not a huge deal because we're just working with geometry at the moment. But just that simple drive letter change should have rippled through everything. Interesting, interesting. Okay, well, let's pop out. I'm going to head back up to my OBJ level, right? Now, it's currently calculating, again, everything, sort of at the object level. And we can take a look at what's happening here. So yeah, that's it. Big, long sort of stream, really, just to say, here's the command op change, guys. Here's how it works. So that's about it, right? But unlike a YouTube tutorial video, this is more kind of me walking you guys through my process. So I'm going to leave that cook, and then I'm going to pop in. What I'll get is an accurate representation of that tire in point cloud, and I'm going to continue to mold on top of it. But I'll leave it at that, because you guys don't want to wait around I mean, seriously, these are huge point clouds. So you guys don't want to wait around and watch this work itself out. So I will leave it at that. It's kind of good to be back. I miss streaming. I probably won't get a chance to do this very often because of the fact that production hours are like long, 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 long. Like the standard day for me is 12 hours. And then when we're pushed overtime, it's longer than that. And then there's me who tends to go in a couple of hours early to get a